Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us on another edition of Reasonable Doubt, brought to you by the Harris County Criminal Lawyers Association. I'm your host, Jimmy ARDOIN, along with my co-host, JULIO VELA. What's going on, man?
I am not a crook.
That's all you got?
That's all I got. I got pulled over this week.
It's a big
I
accomplishment.
didn't get shot.
That's an even bigger accomplishment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm happy about that. I'm sad Tim Duncan's gone, though.
Is that what's got you down?
A little bit.
Yeah, I can understand
Timmy,
that. I can
I
understand
love
that.
you. Love you, man.
Cool. Tired in only the way Tim Duncan can. We got a lot of great stuff to get to tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Obviously, a lot is on everybody's mind with what happened in Dallas last week, what's still going on in Baton Rouge and Minnesota and everything else, and now Nice, France tonight. But we have two great guests tonight on our program. Joining us this evening, our former federal prosecutor and returning guest, Andino Reynal. Andino, thanks for joining us.
Hi, everyone. Happy
Good
to
have
be
you
here,
back.
Jimmy.
And also another good friend of mine. He's a partner over at Smizer, Kaplan & Veselka, practicing white-collar criminal defense law. Dane Ball. Dane, thanks for joining us tonight.
Hello, and thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Good to have you guys on. If I can get over my speaking problems tonight, we might actually have a decent show. So Julio, when we were leaving the show last week, remember we were closing everything up here, and I was, we normally post a picture of everybody who comes on the show. I post it up to social media. Every night we take it and I put it up and getting on my phone, putting on the picture, and people were talking on Facebook, and it was around 9:20, 9:30 in the evening, I guess we're walking out of here, and cops down in the street in Dallas. And you were like, no way, what's going on? I mean, I remember that. You said that. You said, what the heck is going on?
I did.
And then all hell broke loose from there, guys. I mean, it was a weird deal because I see it on Facebook. I see what's going on. I'm posting a picture of the good time we're having. We had just gotten done talking about what had happened in Baton Rouge and what had happened in Minnesota on the show that night. And now we get an all-out war basically on police in Dallas. And to some degree, it's still going on. We saw what happened in Baton Rouge this week with the plot that was busted up, a bunch of stolen guns. Did they ever catch the fourth guy? Did you see?
I don't think, I don't know.
So, guys, I mean, this is just I know it's not necessarily, there's so many aspects to this. I mean, you got the guy who may face charges in Dallas. One guy's dead. There's another who may face some charges. I'm not sure what exactly they've got the other suspect for. You've got this robot that killed one of the suspects. Just so many questions that all of us have on this, and I mean, it's baffling to me where we go from here as a country, because clearly this was born out of the inequality in the system. Bottom line, I don't know any other way to describe it. Do y'all?
I don't, but I agree with you that this problem didn't happen overnight. It's been a long time coming, and for that reason, it's probably going to take a long time to get back to a sense of normalcy and on the road to recovery.
I think, violence begets violence. Police violence begets violence by citizenries. If there is a war on the police, that's because members of certain police forces have faced and waged a war against certain communities. And they've done it in the name of community policing. In the name of stopping broken windows, they've arrested and frisked people for decades. I mean, I had a client recently who'd been arrested multiple times for walking on the street when there was a sidewalk provided.
Walking while black.
That's exactly.
Yes.
Well,
I'm very familiar with that.
Well, and Julio, I mean, out of the four of us on this set, personally, you face it more than any of us every day, in terms of just the discrimination. And Andino, I mean, you're originally from Argentina, but you don't face near the discrimination that Julio does every day. I mean, that's the reality. I'm not trying to say anything that people don't know here. I mean, the reality is the color of your skin makes a big difference. And although you're of Hispanic heritage, you don't look like Julio does. That's the bottom line.
Mexican, man.
Right.
Straight up. Well, I mean, and I grew up in the Rio Grande Valley.
Yeah.
Where everyone is dark-skinned. Everyone is name's Jose Julio Vela. Everyone eats rice and beans and has, mixes English with Spanish in the sentence and how they speak. And I didn't really first experience much of it or much of any racism. I didn't know I knew it's something that's read in textbooks and happens until I went to Austin. And I get to Austin, and then suddenly everyone doesn't look like me. And in fact, most people didn't look like me. And that was the first time that I had ever experienced any sort of differenceness. And when I had to realize that, to a certain degree, I had to act or look. I had to always be on point. It didn't have to necessarily be better, but I couldn't I had to be on point, because if I wasn't, I might not be taken seriously, or I might not have been able to do the things. I ended up being one of 2 student body presidents at the University of Texas. I gave the commencement speech there. And so I had to be just kind of normal, which was very different for me. It was because I couldn't mix in the Spanish with the English in the sentence, and I couldn't say San Jacinto. I had to say San Jack, or I couldn't say Guadalupe.
You say Guadalupe.
Yeah, I had to say Guadalupe.
Yeah.
That was so weird to me, because I literally had to consciously make the shift. I remember before I became a student body leader, I was president of a large Mexican-American cultural group. And my own advisor of the group was bantering with another individual, and they were white, which is not the problem with that. But I remember this specifically, and it was a change in shift, saying, I should probably not do that anymore. When he said, don't you just hate it when they say, oh yeah, we're going to be walking to Guadalupe, and we're going to be on San Jacinto. Why can't they just say Guadalupe or San Jacinto? And I'm sitting there like, dude, you're my advisor, man. Like, yeah. For the Mexican-American Cultural Committee, like, and I'm sitting right here. And then, it was a subconscious shift that I suddenly said, oh shoot, it's not Julio. First of all, I go by JV.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
what we always call you on the program.
If you know me personally, it's JV, right? And so I made sure everybody it's JV. And then I started saying Guadalupe, but it is what it is, Yeah. It is what it is.
Well, and so for us, I mean, this is a real war against the police at this point. But for us, I mean, we're adversaries with the police. We cross-examine them all day, and we try and poke holes in their investigation. I mean, it's the nature of our system and the nature of our job. But I don't know about you guys, but I think to some degree, we deal with FBI agents, we deal with DEA agents, we deal with Houston police officers, we deal with Harris County Sheriff's deputies, we deal with DPS troopers, and it runs across the board. And I've only run across, maybe out of all the cops that have done investigations on my clients or pulled them over, I don't think that I can necessarily say that the overwhelming of them, I can't sit here and say all cops are bad and that all cops do a bad job, okay? They're like everybody else. They're trying to do their job. Do you have a few cops that you know who are dirty? Absolutely. I mean, there are agents that we all know, like, hey, he's a pretty questionable agent. He likes to skirt the line. He likes to do investigations that, you guys have run into that. Andino, you were a former federal prosecutor. How, when there was an agent that brought questionable stuff to you, or a cop that brought a questionable search to you, what did you do?
I think that's exactly the point, right? I think you're absolutely right, Jimmy. The prosecutors, the lawyers, the judges, the superior officers have a duty to police that kind of conduct. Mm-hmm. A prosecutor who covers up malfeasance by a government agent isn't doing his or her job.
Yeah.
Do you think that I don't think that these officers are waking up thinking, I'm gonna shoot a black guy today. I don't think they're thinking that.
I don't either.
But I mean, am I just naive, or is it more implicit kind of things, or what do y'all think?
I've got several friends of mine who are police officers.
Dane, don't be afraid to chime in here. I know you're thinking hard about it, but.
And one of the conversations that I've had with them is, and I agree with you, I think the vast majority of policemen are well-intentioned. I mean, well over 99%. The problem is, and these friends of mine have said, we know the problem officers. We know that if so-and-so is going to be the first responder, there's likely to be a problem, that he's going to escalate the situation, that he's going to treat people poorly. And I think that police have to be more proactive among themselves of saying it's not us against them.
Well, one thing we haven't talked about, I think there is, race is obviously a part of this.
Obviously.
But there are parts of this that go beyond race, and I think something that applies to all citizens that's been going on for a long time is just a war, first of all, a war on the Fourth Amendment, which I think over time has just increased both the authority of law enforcement across the board and increased interactions that doesn't know any boundaries by race. But when you increase those numbers and you take away rights from citizens and you increase power, I think that contributes to the atmosphere that you said a war on police. Well, there are other wars that preceded that have contributed to this.
Well, and I saw an interview on one of the shows, and I can't remember, there was a police chief that was on, and I guess they had some coming together meeting up in D.C. with the president. And one of these police chiefs made a really good point that historically we've got a problem because coming out of the, as you're coming out of the civil rights movement, as you're coming out of basically, a century of desegregation following the Civil War, what's happening? You're having black communities and minority communities who are being policed by white police officers, by all white police forces. And there's a natural friction there. And I think it goes to what you're talking about, Dane, is that you've got a racial problem to begin with because you've got all white police officers policing minorities, and so there's always going to be a distrust there, so to speak, because of what's happened. But then you throw onto that the Fourth Amendment being eroded, the war on drugs, in which who's getting arrested in that? Let's be honest. It's that's an attack combined with what you said about the Fourth Amendment, where it's just now so much easier to stop people, to search people for drugs, and so much easier to get people arrested and convicted and brought in on drug charges, and we filled up the prisons with low-level drug cases. And I thought that was an eye-opening interview for me to see, this is really, I think, Julio, I talked about the OJ documentary a couple weeks ago, maybe after I had watched it, and it started out, it's a 5-part series. I don't know if either of y'all have watched it, but it started out with the racial problems of the LA Police Department in Watts and talked about the Watts riots and everything else. And I think you're just seeing the culmination of this. I think you really are seeing the culmination of, almost 100 years of really problematic policing policy, so to speak.
Well, I mean, okay, so we build the biggest jails. We jail the most people in the country. I mean, in the world, on the planet. We spend more money on jails than education. I mean, of course it's going to boil over at some point. Someone's going to respond to this. I'd imagine, same as on the white-collar crime stuff, the fraud, the Medicare, Medicaid, insurance, money laundering. I mean, if they spent those resources that way, looking into that, I'd imagine that they'd be just as busy. Right? I mean, instead of policing, the schizophrenic who has a gram of crack on them, but they find this because she's walking on the street when there's a sidewalk provided. I think they'd be just as busy if they were looking into all of the I guess, crimes that wouldn't be associated with minorities or black communities.
So, one thing is, step back and say, okay, well, so what do we do about it? Mm-hmm. And a component of it has to be, government and in this instance, police accountability. And there's a real problem on how to go about that. But it certainly is hard to hold police officers accountable when they do wrong. And like Andino said, I don't think they're getting out of bed intending to do something wrong that day. But the same can be said by so many criminal defendants, right? Or targets of investigations. They didn't get out of bed that day intending to do something wrong. So what do we do there? There's immunity problems on the civil side. We can see from the recent prosecutions of police officers how hard it is to obtain a conviction.
That's definitely a big issue.
Yeah, and there's a lot of suspicion about whether to investigate or who should investigate, whether it's the same locale, where it happened, or if the Fed should come in and do it. So I'm not saying I have any answers, but we need to step back and start figuring some things out.
But and that's the hard part about this. I mean, really, we wouldn't be doing our jobs if we didn't at least talk about this week. If we just kind of ignored it, we'd be contributing to the problem of just saying, you know what, we're going to talk about what we do in an everyday life, which is defending people who are accused. And I think it would be irresponsible of us if we didn't talk about this and at least, try to put some kind of, voice, opinion forward. But I'm with you, Dane. I don't know what we can do. I don't know what the solution is. I don't know that there necessarily is one, because how do you legislate basically a change of people's minds? That's essentially what you have to do.
And I don't know if you take away the officers' guns, I don't think necessarily that's the right idea.
No.
I mean, and maybe more training, more mental health screening, more. I'm not sure what some of these fixes. I mean, I heard one fix was that we'll abolish the police force. Okay, that's not going to happen. Okay, yeah.
Well,
okay.
And frankly, that's not a good solution.
Yeah.
I heard a really interesting idea the other day. I can't pinpoint where I heard it, but it involved private insurance for police officers. And the idea behind it is a part of that insurance is paid for by the officers, comes out of their paycheck. And the rates of those insurance go up and up and up as they have things just like speeding tickets. You have a speeding ticket, your insurance goes up. So you might say, I'm not going to speed today. You have a bad interaction, on the beat, maybe your insurance goes up. You have 5 of them, it's really going to go up. And eventually it becomes cost prohibitive to be employed and employ somebody who's a problematic officer.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
It's a great idea.
That's about maybe the most sensible solution I've kind of heard.
Yeah.
That's why
Frankly,
you invite me on the show.
I know.
So well, before we move on, I want to talk about them blowing the guy up.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to go to as well. I mean,
I wanna hear
the
about this.
robot is, that's what I wanted to shift to. I wanted to go to the robot because, we saw so much of what went on here. They posted that guy's picture up on Twitter. Everybody immediately thought he was a suspect, and everybody's like, whoa. He's marching. Just because he has an AR-15, how can he be marching and shooting from an elevated standpoint at the same time? So you've got a bunch of misinformation coming out. I mean, and that's the thing about it. Nobody's perfect. I mean, they're trying to do the job as somebody shooting at them. They find this they're posting this on Twitter. They're just trying to do anything they can. But this robot thing is very strange to me. We've talked about the militarization of the police on here. Mm-hmm. Now you've got a robot, clearly some sort of military equipment, that goes in and neutralizes the threat, let's say. I think that's the best way to put it. That's a little bit scary to me, that they've got robots now who can.
Can they do it? Let me ask the panel. I mean, is it justified? Is it overkill? Is it? I mean, I can only imagine him seeing this robot just coming up with this C4. I think it was C4.
Yeah.
And just staring at it, saying, "Okay, well."
Do you remember that movie from the '80s, Short Circuit?
Yes,
That's
it's Johnny
exactly
Five.
what I thought of when I heard about this robot going in there. It's Short Circuit. To your question, I don't know about the legalities of this.
Was it D.A. Holmes that said that if you can kill a man dead, then you can kill a man dead?
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of the case here. I mean, if it would have been justifiable, self-defense or, use of force to kill the shooter, then why can't you blow him up?
But what kind of precedent does this set, guys? Because I mean, we've talked about what is happening to them getting tanks, getting, I mean, did you see the picture in Baton Rouge where they had the full-on like stormtrooper gear?
Crazy.
I mean, where does it end? When do they get fully armed drones like what they're using over Afghanistan if they want to neutralize a threat?
One thing that is really scary is that the money that is used to purchase this military equipment is funneled by our government to local police forces through the war on drugs and earmarked to buy surplus military equipment. So the Army gets to look good because they're being highly efficient in getting rid of all this surplus stuff that they have left over from Iraq and Afghanistan. And as a result of it, we have police forces that have, armored personnel carriers.
Yeah.
I mean,
And we're just supposed to have a 38 to protect ourselves against government unlawful tyranny, right? I mean, come on.
A 6-shot. We got our first phone call tonight. I want to remind everybody we are going to take phone calls all night long. 713-807-1794 is the number. We also got Twitter up at HCCLA_TV. Send us your questions and comments for Andino, Dane, Julio, and myself right there. But let's drop in our first phone call. Thanks for calling Reasonable Doubt.
Yeah, I was in Sealy coming into Houston one time. I'm white, and police officer catches me doing 80 miles an hour. This was when it was 65 miles an hour. And I finally make it to an exit. It took a while, and then I get off the road and pull over. And I'm reaching around for my insurance card, my driver's license, and the police officer comes up to the window, and I can see him visibly shaking. He's physically shaking. And I'm thinking back after that, I'm thinking, my God, he thought I was reaching for a gun or something, and this is it. Either he's going to die or I'm going to die. And luckily, all I have is 2 pieces of paper, basically, a card and paper in my hand, and there was nothing there to kill me. But he took time before he pulled out a gun and shot me to death. But I mean, the police officers kill white people too. You're making the wrong move. After that, I put my hands at 10 and 2. I get the window open, and I wait for them to tell me what to do, and I just submit. 10 and 2 and submit. That's all you're supposed to do. And don't be talking back to the police officer. Don't throw a tantrum. When they do this, you do it. You just you got to look at their side of the equation too. That at any moment they're going to get killed.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate your phone call and your thoughts. Anytime I get pulled over, and you just had but I do everything I can not to make any sudden movements.
Yeah. I'm not trying to be like,
yeah.
Julio Pancho via VELA on any maneuver I'm doing. I'm like, hey, yeah, I'm good. Yeah. I mean, I think the caller makes a good point, but I wonder, and if anybody's out there, and I'll pose to the panel, did that officer give you the benefit of the doubt? In other words, if you were black or Mexican, probably more black. There's been, on the side note, there's been all sorts of stuff on Facebook that they kill a bunch of Hispanics too, but nobody cries about that either. I don't know. That's a whole other topic. But did
or like they say in Andino's land, don't cry for me, Argentina. Right?
Yeah, right. But did that officer give you or a white driver or that white individual the benefit of the doubt and didn't shoot first and ask questions later? I don't know.
So, I don't know if you guys read it, but very recently the Chronicle was reporting on a Harvard study not too long ago that was, I think, the most extensive that's been done so far. And contrary to what they thought they were going to find going into it, found that although there were some biases that led to increased encounters and such, there was no racial disparity between, and actually the opposite. White folks were shot more often than African Americans or Hispanics. So I haven't looked into what was behind all of that evidence in that study, so I can't speak to it, but that was the
and
study.
The counterpoint to that was that when you outnumber people, 82% of the population to, 10% of the population, that of course your numbers statistically are going to be higher because you have more people. So
I kind of figured it was based on percentages that would have taken that into account, or else it's not a real valid.
But it's important. I was about to. That's a great point, because I saw that too, and I didn't know the basics of it. But if that was it, I mean, I'd imagine that had something to do with it. But at the same token, cops kill white people all the time too.
They do.
Cops have been killing everybody since they were cops. I mean, they've been killing no matter what color you are.
The problem is that we have a lack, an abdication of responsibility in our community by the Harris County District Attorney's Office and by the powers that be at the police department to actually investigate officers who shoot people. I mean, I've got a close friend of mine who's got a civil rights case right now that's gotten a lot of press. I mean, there was a case not too long ago where the police shot a one-armed, one-legged schizophrenic man who was wielding a Bic pen, okay? Yeah. No charges filed. There was a police officer outside of Sherlock's pub, off duty, shot 2 people outside. No charges filed, no disciplinary action taken. I mean, that's even crazier. No disciplinary action taken.
Like I said, I don't think there's really a solution we're going to come to on this program.
Well, I like it. Insurance goes up.
I do. I like that.
Insurance goes up. You know,
like
you got to you shoot some. You have some infractions. Your premiums are going up.
One last thing, just because I sense you're going to move on topics, and I know you need to, but you know, I hope though at the same time the pendulum, it often swings too far the other way, right? And obviously an example is the shooting in Dallas, but I mean even in just a judicial setting or a public outcry of, you know, I don't want police officers now there to be a cry for an investigation and charges in every single shooting, right? We've got to find a way to settle this down and get to a reasonable process moving forward.
Yeah, happy medium. Happy medium.
And I would like to also go on the record really quick, because I know a lot of my fellow officer friends and families who are officers, and I think I speak for most of us, that, and you've said it already, that thank you. And there's no right for any officer being shot in the course of their duty, senseless killing. That's not acceptable. So thank you on that. And so
absolutely, we all echo that. Want to move on to our next topic. I want to rehash a little bit different spin in our conversation last week about Hillary Clinton. Actually, before we get to that, let me get to this phone call we got coming in here. Hello, welcome to Reasonable Doubt. Thanks for your call.
Yeah, I have 2 comments/questions. You can handle them however you like.
Okay.
But earlier, I think it was Mr. ARDOIN.
Yeah.
You said that there's a war on police based on what happened in Dallas last week. And if that's the case, then how are non-white, as Mr. VELA pointed out, not just black, but non-white communities supposed to take the treatment that they've received and the thousands of deaths a year that are documented at the hands of police officers, many of which are unarmed? Are they supposed to take that as a war on their communities? That's number one. And number two, my question is, what kind of solution can we expect from this kind of thing? If not a response from those communities, I mean, what else do we expect from these kinds of disproportionate and unequal access to justice?
Yeah, thanks. Those are 2 great questions. Thanks for your call. I mean, I don't know that there is, like I said, I think that they are going to really struggle to come up with what the solution to this is. In terms of the whole war on police, I think that you're seeing a response, and when I say war, I mean it's clearly a response to what has gone on for almost a century now of you know, discrimination, you know, putting poor people in prison, arresting them and imprisoning them at a way higher rate than white people and rich people. So, I mean, I think to that degree, I sympathize with what the caller's saying. Yeah, I mean, they've run out of options at this point. You know, the minority communities have run out of options, so to speak, in terms of what can they do. I mean, not saying that what they've done, obviously, that's not the best response, or what these individuals have done, because by no means do I want to paint the entire community with a broad brush, because most people are out there, they're trying to, and this is the real problematic part that I see, is a lot of these people are trying to demonstrate, and you've got people, law enforcement in Louisiana who's trying to basically interfere with their right to protest. That's a subject for another day, but that's kind of what I see. So I hope that answers the caller's question. But let's move on, like I wanted to, about kind of piggyback what we were talking about last week with Hillary Clinton, because I kind of want to weave all these topics together, guys, because I think, what's been going on is, how people are treated in the system. And we saw last week what happened with Hillary Clinton when she got caught in the system. I said I didn't have a problem with what the FBI ultimate decision was, because I don't think, when they really looked at everything, and being a former federal prosecutor, you and I have gone up against each other when you were on the other side. You know what it's like to make these charging decisions. Dane, you know the same thing. You've been through it with, on the investigation side. You got to analyze whether you can prove your case to a jury. And part of that is you got a federal court in Washington, D.C. It's a highly liberal jurisdiction. You have the Democratic candidate for president who's, loved by Democrats. I think it would have been a hard time convicting her. I know you got your thoughts, Andino, on the statute, so share your thoughts on what happened last week.
I think from a practical standpoint, what you're saying is absolutely on point. I mean, I think it probably would be hard to find a jury that hasn't already formed an opinion as to her guilt or innocence. I can't even imagine what that kind of jury selection would have been like. At the same time, when you look at the statute and you see that what it required was gross negligence, and then you have the, Comey coming out and saying that she exercised extreme carelessness. I mean, those two things sound fairly similar. I mean, it sounds like, based on the FBI's investigation, that she probably technically violated the statute. And there's an old. You
don't even have to have a law degree to figure that one out.
There's an old saying among prosecutors that you can beat the rap, but you can't beat the ride, and that certainly would have been the case for Hillary Clinton. Had she been indicted, she might have very well been acquitted in the long run. But what would it have meant in terms of her candidacy, in terms of her political viability? I think that played an important role in Comey's decision, because you're knocking out, for all intents and purposes, the nominee, the presumptive nominee for one of our country's political parties.
And not just anyone, the first woman. I mean, that's a big deal. I mean, whether or not she's qualified or not, but she's first woman to have a real good shot. I mean, that's a big deal, and I think so.
So what's interesting to me, though, is not so much the decision to recommend indictment or not, but just the role that the FBI played here and how public it was.
Yeah.
And back to kind of how you started this segment, right, is the tie-in, I think, to our themes tonight is going to be the public wants to know that there's some sense of fairness and justice to how people are treated. And the truth is, there's not. And so how do things go in a normal federal criminal investigation?
Yeah, how many of your clients have gotten a pronunciation from the FBI that they are no longer a target?
So clients always ask when they come in, and they're in the middle of an investigation, they say, how will I know when this is all over? And the truthful answer is, and I always tell them, they're not going to send you a letter. You're not going to get a fruitcake saying, we apologize, we're dropping the investigation, Merry Christmas. It usually, unfortunately, takes a long time, like when the statute of limitations for that offense runs. That's when you know it's over.
Yeah.
So that's how it works for normal folks, and I think an issue is, should it work for everybody like that? Or, I would perhaps argue, it should work for more people like it did for Hillary Clinton. People have a right, when they are under investigation, to know that they and all the other people who are affected by an investigation can move on with their lives and get back to business.
But you say that, and in terms of the right to know that an investigation has been closed, but I'm not, and here's the thing, if you didn't watch the D.B. Cooper documentary, you didn't miss much, because you had the fortune of not wasting 4 hours of your life like I did, because it showed nothing new. But the interesting thing about it was they go in, and D.B. Cooper was the only hijacking case that's never been solved in this country. The FBI has never solved it in 45 years. Guy gets a $200,000 ransom in Seattle, takes off, jumps out the back of a 727 over the Washington Forest, never been found again, okay? The case has been open for 45 years and they've never found this guy. They thought they had something, so History Channel brings up this whole documentary and they're trying to reopen the case. But the interesting thing there is these two investigators they bring on, they go to the FBI, okay? And they want to know, what the FBI has in terms of evidence. Now, this is a 45-year-old unsolved hijacking case, which is they got a John Doe indictment, so it's still live. They have a secret indictment out there. So if the guy's ever caught, he could be prosecuted. But they wouldn't share a damn thing with these people. They're on the History Channel. Well, I can't really say anything about that. We eliminated that person as a subject, and that's all I would say. They wanted answers. These investigators we want answers from the FBI. Why did they eliminate this person? We've got all this evidence, and the FBI stonewalled them, and they cited the Privacy Act, 5 U.S.C. 522, the Privacy Act that said the FBI couldn't comment on an investigation. And I paused the thing, and I'm like, I've never heard of the Privacy Act, so I looked it up. And I wonder if Comey violated the Privacy Act by going this far, because I agree with you, Dane. I mean, our clients should be able to know that an investigation has ended, but should they know in such a public fashion?
Well, I would say usually it's to a client, a business, or an individual's interest. Usually people start learning that there's an investigation, and so when it's over, the people surrounding them are affected. They're employees. They should know it's over. But another thing that could be violated in a situation like that. Am I correct that there was not a grand jury impaneled for that investigation? Now, if there was, and I don't know if there was, but then there's certainly grand jury secrecy rules that would have been problematic to make that detailed of a statement on one side of your mouth saying we're not recommending charges, on the other hand saying all sorts of things that are damning against Hillary Clinton. That can be problematic.
But like you said, Andino, you can't beat the rap, but you can beat the rat. You can beat the rap, but you can't beat the rat. Let me get that right. So she beat the rap, but I mean, the polls have changed. I mean, his statement has certainly altered her public opinion polls. I mean, almost 60% of people don't think they can trust her now. I mean, it was already high enough as it was. And now you get this referral. The Republicans in Congress, they're just not done. They want a referral for perjury. I mean, her reputation's been tarnished on this.
Absolutely. One of the things that's interesting about Comey, and I know you can identify with this, Dane, Jimmy, Julio, police officers and FBI agents always say that they don't make any charging decisions. They're all like Joe Friday when you get them on the stand. It's just the facts. I'm not deciding who's guilty and who's innocent. That's, the prosecutor makes that choice and then the jury's going to decide that. So I was kind of stunned when Comey came out there and expressed that it was, somehow the FBI's decision whether this was going to move forward or not. I do think that by taking it out of Loretta Lynch's hands, politically, he was very astute in the sense that he was able to lay bare all these facts that if the case had continued, he would have had a really hard time talking about.
Yeah. And you say that, but does the fact that he's a former deputy attorney general, I mean, he was very high up, very well publicized that he opposed the expansion of the Patriot Act. I mean, when he went to Ashcroft, when Ashcroft was in the hospital and said, the White House wants to do this, I am not going to do this. And you need to set everybody straight. I'm your acting attorney general right now. But I'm coming to you because I want you behind me on this. So I wonder, you talk about him coming to the forefront, and if he had not been if he wasn't a lawyer, if he wasn't a former deputy attorney general, do you think a non-lawyer, non-Justice Department, former Justice Department deputy AG would have done the same thing as director of the FBI?
Hard to say, but I mean, as a former prosecutor, I mean, he should know better. in that sense. I mean, than to come out and be commenting on whether somebody should or shouldn't be prosecuted.
Right. Well, I agree, and I try to look at these things. I don't know what's going on behind the scenes, so I can't make that judgment call. But what I try to do is I try to step back and say, what can I learn about this for my clients, right? Mm-hmm. And one thing is, when you don't have to say something, don't say it. I've got no problem with him coming out and saying, we're not recommending criminal charges. It's closed in our book. End of story. When you keep going and you don't have to, you create problems for yourself. So that's like my takeaway teaching moment for clients, right? Is this is what happens when you talk for 4 minutes when you can talk for 40 seconds. And it helps them understand that principle, right?
The right to remain silent is huge. I mean, I couldn't believe when she walked in and met with them for 3.5 hours.
Well, so that's another thing that's different about people want to know, right? They watch things on TV and they say to you, well, hey, I saw in the such and such case, and you stop there because you're not such and such, right?
Exactly.
So what else is different about this case? How many times did you meet as a prosecutor with the key target and then make your decision 2 days later without then cross-checking any of the facts you learned from that person? I mean, that certainly looks to the outsider like, we've made our decision, we're going to check this box, doesn't matter what the person says. I can't say that that's true, but that's what it looks like from an outside observer.
No, we talked about it. She's good. That's not what happened.
Well, but so here's the thing now. I mean, you look at it, she's got the referral. Chaffetz has gone, oh, you'll have the referral on your desk in hours, Mr. Director. Okay. So they're going to refer for perjury, right? And you and I were talking, Andino, you thought that the case, and you just said it here, the case that they just dumped was the strongest case. But, okay, and I'm going to ask you about the reasonable prosecutor standard in a second, because so they make the referral for false statements here. Clearly, what he said in that press conference, plenty of evidence of false statements. If they're not going to indict her for the bigger charge, how do they indict her for perjury? And if they don't indict her for perjury or lying to Congress, then they really have egg on their face, because they had a lot less when they charged Roger Clemens with the exact same thing. How do they get around that?
I want to defer to Dane in part on this, because I was walked in here and I said, I think the perjury case is weak as compared to the other case. And then Dane actually explained exactly how weak it was. So, I mean, you know what you were talking about.
Well, yeah, I mean, you got to look. The false statement, right? That's not all the elements, right? They have to be intentionally false or willfully false, right? There's a mens rea, a mental state requirement to it. So that's the sticking point where it gets tough to prove whether someone's guilty. And so you've got to break down the statements. Statements like there was one server. They weren't marked classified. But in each one of those, there's a defense on how you could say, again, from the outside, how a reasonable person could get that one wrong. I don't know how many servers are at my law firm. I don't know if it's 1 or 5 or what it is. Something wasn't marked classified. Well, it was, but not in the usual way. So were you intentionally lying about those things, or did you just say something and in retrospect is false?
Right.
I mean, I have clients all the time that have said something that in retrospect is false, and our argument is that was not an intentional lie.
Yeah. We got another phone call coming in here. Let's drop it in. Hello, thanks for calling Reasonable Doubt.
Hello, I'd like to ask the panel, if in the United States you're innocent until proven guilty, how much effort is given to investigating whether or not you're guilty before you're charged?
Great question. At the state level, absolutely zero.
At least in this county.
Yeah, I mean,
the arrest first, ask questions later mentality down here.
Well, and there's a huge difference between state cases and federal cases. State cases, what we call the blue collar or the street crimes. I mean, they're usually, it's a cop pulling somebody over because they got a bad taillight, or, they see them run a stop sign, and so they do a little, either they field sobriety test them for whether or not they got a DWI, they make the decision right there. They call intake. So there's not a long time, but on the federal side, and there's the occasional state case that does take a while. If you've got a major offender's case, some murder cases even take a while. I mean, they may not find the murder weapon right away. They may not have all of the forensic evidence, and they may not, if you don't arrest the person who does the killing right there on the spot, you got to find the suspect. So in that sense, but it happens with almost every federal case, that there is usually an extended period of investigation. In fact, I always like to tell my clients, like, look, you have a right to a speedy trial, but that doesn't mean you want to exercise it, because guess what? The feds have been investigating you for 5, 6, 7 years, sometimes on bank fraud cases, which have a statute of limitations of 10 years. I can't be ready to try this case in 70 days. I can't go through all the records that they've subpoenaed and spent years going through. So to the caller's question, I mean, there is a lot that goes into, and there's actually a U.S. Attorney's Manual which outlines what's supposed to be done. Maybe you can share for us kind of those standards.
Well, no, there's the principles of federal prosecution lay out the different standards that the prosecutor has to consider in determining whether charges should be brought. And among those is his or her good faith belief that if presented to an appropriate jury, that you can obtain a conviction. I mean, you should not bring a case that has insufficient evidence. Now, that being said, you know, I know this is a tool that all of us have in our toolbox, is often we deal with and see results-oriented investigations, both at the federal level and at the state level, where the government begins its investigation with an idea that a particular person has committed a crime and then goes about building a case against them. And sometimes, and I don't think this is done through ill will, but sometimes that puts the blinders on the investigators, and they don't, you know, they have confirmation bias. They don't follow up on other things that might have led them in a different direction.
Dane, you were a part of probably the longest, one of the longest investigations on a case that I can remember, and that was the BP case. And you just got an acquittal. Your client, Bob Kaluza, got acquitted a couple months ago, I believe it was. You guys did a great job for him over in New Orleans. And what started out as this huge case, I mean, you had Coast Guard hearing after Coast Guard hearing, civil cases going on. You know, the Department of Justice took a long time investigating that case, finally charged your client, which took another long time to get to trial. Government dismisses all the felony charges, and you go to trial on a misdemeanor. Talk about that experience.
Well, it was a wild experience and a good example of what we were just talking about. You know, the caller asked, are you innocent until proven guilty? And the answer is yes, but the question is, how meaningful is that and at each stage in a case, right? Are you innocent until proven guilty during an investigation? Yes, but here's the problem with the grand jury process, as you know. They don't have to present any defense favorable evidence, and the defendant has no right to participate or even know what's going on. So there's not a lot of evidence required when it's all one-sided to lead to an indictment. Once you're indicted, are you innocent until proven guilty at trial? The answer is yes, but the reality is the defendant usually has to prove his innocence at trial. At least that's what I tell my clients and say we're getting ready to go do, because although the principle sounds great, it's just not often the reality.
Well, that's especially true in white-collar cases, I think. More so than any other case. The burden almost shifts to you to explain why your client is not guilty.
Right, so the example there, Bob Kaluza, the BP well site leader on the Deepwater Horizon, he sat there for 2.5 years being investigated without being able to participate in any real way in the process. Nothing but government favorable evidence was presented to the grand jury. He's indicted and then had to wait another 4 years, a couple of appeals in the process to get to a jury, and took a jury about 2 hours to find him not guilty.
Jeez.
And after the end, you can beat the rap, but you can't beat the ride.
6
and
years.
The government has not sent him the fruitcake and apology yet.
No apology note for all his troubles. Yeah, I mean, the caller asks, are you innocent until proven guilty? But I tell people this, on a white-collar case, if you've got, a nice suit, a good haircut, you look good, the burden almost shifts to you to explain why you're not guilty, because juries almost expect that. I feel like in most of the state cases, or even in drug cases at the federal level, even they don't really care about hearing from the defendant. They're solely looking at the evidence. They are looking at the evidence of what the government is bringing. But I feel like in white collar cases where your client has made a business decision in a lot of these cases, and I'm not talking about the full-on scheme where you're stealing people's identities and that sort of stuff, but I'm talking the ones like the Enron, where that was a true business judgment type deal, like the McDonnell case, the Bob McDonnell, former governor of Virginia, where we're talking about bribes and what trying to explain what constitutes a bribe and what was in your mind when you were taking this, what were you thinking. Those types of cases almost 100% require the defendant to take the stand and look those people in the eye and tell them why you're innocent. So that's the difficulty I see in those cases.
Is there a difference? And most of I can count the number of federal cases on my hand that I've been directly involved with.
At least you can count.
Right. Well, all right. I mean, that's street lawyers, So I've handled thousands of state level cases. Is there a difference between on the misdemeanor or federal side on how a case is brought? In other words, I'm on the misdemeanor side on the state level, we don't need an indictment, or the government doesn't need an indictment. If you charge with a felony, they need one. Are there different ways that an individual on the federal side is charged?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the same as state. Grand jury is only impaneled to hear felonies, so you're not going to have a grand jury returning the charging instrument on a misdemeanor.
Okay.
Dane's case was particular because you ended up with a misdemeanor charge, but there was a long roller coaster ride to get there, and a lot of felony charges that were dismissed. Generally, the U.S. Attorney's Office is going to be bringing felony cases rather than misdemeanors.
I guess like a misdemeanor federal charge would be driving while intoxicated on a naval base or something. Would that be a type of misdemeanor?
You get a lot of those down in Corpus.
Yeah. Really?
Yeah.
Or at San Antonio, you're going to get military-based charges, and there's the Assimilative Crimes Act, which applies to things that happen on Indian reservations and places like that, where also you're going to have these more state-type charges.
I will say, though, I've handled a number of the DWI cases down in Corpus where there's the national seashore that people get caught boozing it up and driving out of the seashore. they get that. One tip, if you ever get these cases, always challenge your license, the administrative process, because without fail, the cops that arrest you, they fill out that thing saying that they are a sworn Texas peace officer. They're not. So they can't legally make that affirmation in the document, so you actually win the case and keep your license. But it's very rare that the U.S. Attorney's Office down there actually prosecutes those cases to the fullest extent. They usually give you some sort of, pretrial diversion kind of deal, and you come in agreement, go take a couple alcohol classes, and we'll dismiss the case type thing.
So let me get this straight. If I I have a better chance of not getting a DWI conviction
in federal court
than I do over here on a state level.
That's absolutely
correct. Good to know.
So if you're gonna do it, and do it on some federal land. Briefly, guys, I want to talk about this. And I mentioned the McDonnell case, the former Virginia governor. A couple weeks ago, he gets his case reversed by the Supreme Court, 8-0, on a bribery case that was really bad. The optics of it were just horrible. Even Chief Justice Roberts said, I do not agree with the conduct here. But what they reversed it on was the federal government, the federal prosecutors, pushing the envelope about what constitutes a bribe. And I want to kind of tie this in, because we only have a few minutes left here, but you see something like that, and what people will say, the first thing they say is, well, the system worked for him because he was politically connected. He got the reversal, and the Supreme Court agreed with him 8-0. So they'll just look at that and say it's a perpetuation of the corruption. Hillary gets off, this guy gets off. And we started off with what happened in Dallas and the inequities in the system. But the reality is, in that case, he might get retried. And the jury convicted him the first time. And it's likely that he's probably going to get convicted again because the evidence that came out, if you read the factual recitation in the Supreme Court's opinion, it's just bad. I mean, so...
We don't usually have cases with good facts.
No, our motion to change the facts is almost always denied.
We deal with the facts as they come to us, but you know, the takeaway from that case is it's just 8-0 is not close, and it is just another example of overzealous prosecution in a certain context, which is just overstretching and reaching on a particular statute that has real words in it that you can read and define and say what they mean, and when you start stretching that definition, you run into problems, and the Supreme Court has repeatedly had to tell prosecutors, you know, rein it in. It was a pretty no-brainer decision in my book.
He was just making some calls, you know, putting some meetings together, you know.
A couple of parties.
Yeah, you know, I mean, it's just, you know.
But, you know, that people constantly harp on how the system treats those that are politically connected, powerful, rich differently than they do minorities. And I hear that argument, and I sympathize with that argument. But when you step over across the street to federal court, setting Hillary Clinton aside and others, you know, the pardons that happened with Watergate in the 70s, you know, some of the pardons that happened in the Bush White House and everything else, the reality is money, power, and fame doesn't really doesn't play in the federal courts. In fact, it plays against you.
Sometimes it hurts you.
Yeah. I mean, look at Martha Stewart. Look at Wesley Snipes. All these people were made examples out of in my book.
I think you can't ignore the economics of the situation. Somebody with a well-funded defense is always going to have a leg up on somebody who doesn't have the necessary money to pay for it. I mean, even in our country where, thank God, people are guaranteed the right to counsel, that is not the right to the expert of your choosing.
True.
That is not the right to spend as much money as you want on the investigators of your choosing. You know, it's not a problem that we're going to be able to solve because there's not an infinite amount of money out there for everybody to use. But I do think that being well-heeled helps.
But my point is, it doesn't help in the federal system. I think that argument plays well, Andino, in the state side, where you can't get proper forensic evidence, where people are, you know, where drug kits can't be tested and everything. But I just feel like in the federal side, it doesn't work. We got a couple minutes here. Let's see if we can drop this phone call before we get off the air. Hello, thanks for calling Reasonable Doubt.
Yeah, do you guys think that maybe you're dealing with more white-collar police officers in the federal system, more educated, more trained, highly resourced than you are in the state system? And that may be kind of the difference for why in the state system more people kind of squeak by than in the federal system?
Really quickly, yeah, I tend to agree with that. You've got usually well-educated agents, some of whom have law degrees. So yeah, you get a better quality of investigators, and that does have a huge part to play. And on that note, guys, we got to wrap this thing up. It's been a great time having you guys on. Gonna have to have you guys back again.
Happy to.
Yeah. Dane Ball, Andino Reynal, and of course my co-host Julio VELA.
And I didn't do this last time, but I need to send a shout out to my kids.
Send it.
To Rafael, Isabel, and my wife Mercedes. Thanks for watching.
And with that, ladies and gentlemen,
Jack,
we are
you better
off.
be in bed.
Yeah, right. We are off next week, but we'll be back in 2 weeks with another show. So good night, everybody. See you in 2 weeks.